How the mighty have fallen is a saying very much suitable to describe the Roman Empire and its decline from its golden age that ended with Marcus Aurelius to the beginning of the military anarchy that was the so-called crisis of the 3rd century. After the decadent rule of Marcus's son Commodus and another civil war, the reign of the empire fell to the Severan dynasty. Its emperors became more and more reliant on the support of the army and its officers. That was not a new phenomenon. After all, Vespasian took power with the support of the army more than a century earlier. But as the Severans continued to neglect the Senate and essentially bribe their support for the throne with the increasing state revenue for the army, this would prove to be an unsustainable model for the empire that was still modeled by the administration set by the first emperor Augustus and refined with each successor. With the end of the Severan dynasty, the rise of so-called soldier emperors was accelerated by rival regional armies who wanted to put their own men on the throne. The soldiers, at that point, became more loyal to their officers than to their emperor. The internal chaos was complemented by the outside pressures of Persia and the invading barbarian tribes beyond the Roman frontier. Those imperial armies loyal to the emperor could simply not be at multiple places at once, and the rulers would have to constantly juggle between suppressing pretenders to the throne, European invaders, and the Persian threat. Often these attempts would end in disaster. These wars would also place a more and more heavy burden on the provinces that could have had otherwise put their surplus money into development, trade, public works, and welfare. But higher taxation, military requisitioning, and general sense of insecurity put an end to all of that. The crisis of the 3rd century begins with murder. The last member of the Severan dynasty was killed by the Roman troops at the Rhine border. Severus Alexander wanted to negotiate with the invading Germanic tribes. This would, however, mean paying their leaders off, which the soldiers didn't take lightly, as they felt this money could be given to them instead. After the assassination, they declared one of their own as the new emperor, Maximinus Thrax. Most probably originating from either Thracia or Moesia from a military family, Maximinus Thrax as an emperor demonstrated great military expertise, first against Germanic tribes and later against Dacians and Sarmatians. His focus was mainly on the Roman army, increasing its number by additional recruitments and also increasing its pay and rewards. This boosted his popularity with the troops. To quickly move the army, he also prioritized maintenance of roads and other infrastructure. And where did he get money for all of this? He increased taxes and ensured the ruthless collection, seizing private property and additionally burdening the senatorial class. These measures sparked a rebellion that originated in the senatorial ranks, first in Africa and then in Italy. Maximinus marched on Italy from Sirmium with a large force of soldiers, supply escort and siege engines. Despite slow progress, he reached the border town with the region of Italy, where he performed a sacrifice for a good outcome of the conflict. The panic of the local populace spread beyond those indirect paths of Maximinus, where people left in masses and buried their fortunes, hoping to eventually return and retake their lost treasures. When Maximinus reached Emona, the first Italic city, he was met with a soulless city. Everyone ran away after taking what they could carry and left behind nothing, neither food nor shelter that could help the hostile army. Maximinus continued his march towards Aquileia, one of the largest and most important cities in the empire. There, the people fortified the stockpiled city and planned to withstand the siege. The daily attacks were repulsed and Maximinus couldn't effectively supply his army, which gradually became more and more exhausted and demoralized. After more than a month, his troops began to rise up against him and some even defected. In the final uprising, they executed Maximinus, his son and his close advisors, after which they also swore allegiance to the two senatorial emperors. The pair, however, quickly began to distrust one another and both were executed by the Praetorian Guard. The new emperor became Gordian III. This series of events, the military march to Italy, uprisings and political as well as literal backstabbing, is a good example of the entire period. It would continue to replay again and again with small variances and different names of wannabe emperors. The infighting was additionally accompanied by the invading barbarians and the waves of epidemics known as Plague of Cyprian. The crisis was further exacerbated by the inability of the emperors to stabilize themselves on the throne and found a new dynasty. During the crisis, 17 emperors switched on the throne, more if you count additional self-proclaimed emperors that shortly governed smaller pieces of the empire. The average rule of an emperor therefore lasted for about 2 years and 8 months. In contrast, let us mention that in the preceding 2nd century, the average rule lasted for 17 years. The crisis of the 3rd century brought with it desolation of cities, economic and demographic downfall, civil conflicts, and a general lack of law and increased banditry. Not all regions or even neighboring cities were equally impacted though, and there the losses could be replaced. From 270, Emperor Aurelian reconnected the broken empire back again, and Rome was once more able to stand up to its problems. The borders were renewed and strengthened, the reformed Roman army achieved new victories against barbarians and could stand up to the Persian threat. The economic potential of the empire strengthened and the number of civil unrests dropped. But the crisis of the 3rd century wouldn't end until the ascension of Diocletian, who managed to stabilize the Roman Empire with his reforms, despite the internal and external threats. And it would be these threats and rivalries that would sprout forth again and again, further weakening the dying empire no matter what the reforms undertaken by its rulers. This was not the first time the Roman army found itself in a crisis. If you want to learn about the Year of 4 Emperors and the rise of Vespasian, click on the next video or link in the description below. Be sure to like, subscribe, you know how YouTube works, and I will bring you more history soon.